Okay, so I know this is day two. I know this has been a wonderful, action-packed, energy-intensive event. I wanted to dive in and just start with a little bit of my own background and intro. So first of all, welcome to the session on leadership and innovation for Changemaking Institutions. My name is Marina Kim. I am the co-founder and executive director of Ashoka U, which is a program of the global organization Ashoka. I know you've been co-hosted by our wonderful Rajesh and the Ashoka Singapore team, as well as our Singapore Management University team. I am just delighted to share a few insights that we've had over the past 13 years since Ashoka U started. And I actually started my journey in social innovation and change making starts 20 years ago. I was an undergraduate student at Stanford University. I had just come and I was an early millennial, but I wanted to do something meaningful and impactful. And I didn't know how and I didn't know what, but I knew that I would find it in my learning journey. And I knew that I would find a way to intersect it with my studies and then my professional path. And little did I know, I happened to stumble into social innovation my first week in the university. There was a lecture series called Social Innovation and the Social Entrepreneur, where they brought speakers to come and tell their life story, their work. And I basically, from the first time I saw a social entrepreneur, I just completely fell in love, and it helped clarify so many things about all my questions. It put together my desire to have impact, as well as my desire to have a professional path, as well as a desire to think strategically and have depth of impact, but also scale of impact. And so there began 20 years ago my own journey in social innovation and change making. Fast forward several years, I graduated. I've been at Ashoka now for nearly 16 years. I spent my first few years at Ashoka learning the ropes, learning about the incredible network of Ashoka Fellows that we have all over the world, nearly 4,000 social entrepreneurs around the world working in every single issue area in 90 countries. It's just an incredible place and space to be inspired every single day. And within my first few years, I was able to put some of my interests and passions around having been a student leader who had discovered this path in my own university journey. And I realized that there was a huge opportunity for so many other students and so many other universities that hadn't yet figured out how to cultivate learning experiences in a systematic way for students, so that whether they're in their first year or their final year, or they're a graduate student or they're a community partner, I think there is an increasing desire to contribute to impact, be part of something meaningful, and have that intersect with your academic journey, your professional journey, and your life journey. And so, I am so glad that this event is happening. I think these ideas around how you can contribute and how you can be part of something bigger, where we are also shaping primary schools, secondary schools, in addition to colleges and universities, in addition to thinking about the professional opportunities that happen post-graduation as a professional. I think this is something that just is increasing. And so I'll invite folks to put up the slides. And I just wanted to quickly share a little bit more, not from my perspective, but a bit from the perspective of the work that we've done with Ashoka U, just to give you a high-level overview of what to expect in our time together. I'll try to be quick and do these kind of intro kind of framing ideas, just so we can have the same conversation and the same ideas to work from in 20 minutes or so, or less, if I can whiz through them. Then we will bring some real stories into this from the Singaporean context, and I'm delighted to have some of our colleagues from Ashoka Singapore, as well as amazing educational leaders from Singapore Management University. And we'll have a mini panel that will be action-packed and include personal stories and some strategy. And then we'll have time for breakout discussions and also some Q&A. And so we really want to make sure there's some good content, there's some good conversation, and that there's some stories and to bring these concepts to life. Okay, so really quickly diving in, next slide, please. Yes, as I mentioned, I'm just with Ashoka, the home of change makers, and our vision is, next slide, is really to unlock the potential of every single person in the world to be a change maker. And you probably, I know this is day 2, so you probably heard all about it. But basically, we're looking for everyone to find what it means to them to contribute to positive social impact. And we found that part of it is making sure that you're contributing to positive social change, which means thinking of what's best for the good of all, but also this idea that you often need to think that you can have a voice and have the ability to contribute. And so a big part of it is self-permission. And for us, the biggest part of self-permission is basically just doing it. And then that's the spark, just like going to the gym. Change making is a muscle. And so you clearly can't start and try to be an Ashoka fellow on your first attempt. You don't start bench pressing 300 pounds on your first day at the gym. You really have to start with small weights, small problems, small social issues, small challenges, and keep trying. And over time, as you get more sophisticated, you get more confident, you learn how to corral more people, you can take on bigger and bigger challenges and have greater and greater impact. And so it really is a lifelong cumulative set of skills and practices and behaviors that you develop. Okay, next slide. And so just because we work with universities a lot, I quickly want to define a few terms. There's never a perfect way to define all of these terms, so I will just do a very high level, quick and dirty. Generally, we tend to think of social entrepreneurship as having a bit more of a focus on an organizational form, so a venture, a very specific idea, usually working with an individual that identifies as a social entrepreneur, a focus on a founder. This is hugely important, a very powerful force in the world. And often we found in universities tends to be most closely aligned with the business school and business school ideas and models and norms. We've actually found that the term social innovation can sometimes be kind of more inclusive. And so as we started to work with more universities that go beyond business schools, we've actually found that in the last 15 or 20 years, in addition to the term social entrepreneurship, we've been able to expand the use of the term social innovation. And it really is also not just the focus on the individual, but really the process of innovation and the process of social change. And how do you include many people in that? And the process can include, and it can be done not just through organizations and founding a venture, it could be done through policy change. It could be done through culture change. It can be done through an app. And so there's so many different creative ways to do social innovation. And change making is really even more inclusive. And so this is something that you don't have to have just a professional path. It really is something you can be a change maker in your family. You can be a change maker in your community. You can be a change maker in your church. You can be a change maker in any and every situation. It doesn't have to be a paid work. It can be just a key part of who you are and what you do and what you bring to your job, what you bring to your education. And so that is what we're trying to spread. We actually see Ashoka U has been around, again, as I mentioned, for 13 years. We've worked with hundreds of universities around the world. We've been very lucky and grateful to partner closely with Singapore Management University as one of our Changemaker campuses and our only Changemaker campus in Singapore. And we're really just focused on how we can support educators to be change makers, how we can support them to support students to be change makers, and then how they can also have the institution be more aligned with a culture that is about change making. And so how can universities and higher ed be contributing to positive change in their local and global communities? Okay, next slide, please. And so just, there's, again, many different ways to slice and dice the skills. At the very last slide I'll share, we do have a whole series of publications that we're opening up for free, one of which is a focus on, if you're an educator, a whole learning outcomes guide and many different ways to adapt the types of skills and competencies and outcomes for educators that have been used at both undergraduate levels, graduate levels, as well as high schools. And so we have a whole publication we can share about it, but at the very high level, how do we think about the types of skills, empathy, problem solving, collaboration, teamwork, creativity that really are required to be successful at all in the workplace. And especially if we're not going to be robots, these are the types of things that actually robots can't do. Robots are not creative, they're not collaborative, they don't have empathy. And so as we really think for the next 50 years or more, these are the types of skills that will give young people, professional leaders, managers, and parents the competitive advantages to be successful and to really add value to every organization and in a professional capacity. Next slide. So, I like to go back to, and one more click, which will fill out the, okay, great, thanks. And so I like to think about, there's just a historical moment happening. There is a convergence of things where, as technology is changing, as the globalization is happening, as kind of the need for skills and employment trends are evolving, and all of these things, there is an increase in what's needed that happens to correlate with what we call at Ashoka changemaker skills and mindsets. But it's also correlating with millennials and Gen Z, and just a desire and a passion from a lot of people who are young and seeking purpose and meaning. And honestly, this is something that everyone of all ages has, this desire to contribute and a desire to have meaning and purpose in your work and in your community. And so we have just found that it is just a convergence of trends and desires and needs that we are able to provide through our network of campuses. And in the next slide, I'll talk a bit more about how we've seen it embedded into institutional values. So I'll do a quick case study. Tulane University is one of the campuses that we've worked at since year 2 of Ashoka U. I know it's an American example, but just for those of you, you may have heard of Hurricane Katrina. It happened in 2005. It was a huge natural disaster. At the time, the entire campus was evacuated. As students came back, they rebuilt. It took over a year. All students had to go to other universities. And as they rebuilt, they really said, this is a new opportunity to really decide we are rebuilding for what. This is an interesting example now that we have had a pandemic, and a lot of people are also thinking about, what do we want to rebuild now that we're resetting? But they decided that public service and social innovation would be a core focal point, because New Orleans was in shambles, and Tulane University wanted to be a key driver of rebuilding and contributing to the New Orleans community. The university has been very embedded in the community. A lot of students actually started becoming attracted to be part of that rebuilding effort. Tulane has had like triple, quadruple, quintuple the number of applications. And part of it is that there's this deep desire in contributing to rebuilding New Orleans and getting involved in public service, community innovation, and social entrepreneurship. And so over the course, you'll see kind of every couple of years, there was a new structural innovation that happened that really allowed the university to deepen and embed and institutionalize more and more significant programs in social innovation. It started out of the public service effort that was a campus-wide effort, and then it was layered on top of that with a special initiative from the president around social entrepreneurship. In addition, they focused not just on student support, but also building it into the deep culture and norms of the institution. So they funded professors across disciplines. That's another key innovation at Tulane. They specifically pushed it to not just be in a single school, but to be something that professors across different disciplines focused on. They also became a place that had one of the first undergraduate minors that was also an interdisciplinary minor, the social innovation and social entrepreneurship minor. That they call SICE. And then they had one of the trustees fund what became like a 15, and it's a public number, $15 million endowed center. And they raised more money since then for the Phyllis M. Taylor Center for Social Innovation and Design Thinking. And that is a campus-wide center that has academic programming and houses the minor and links in the professors of social entrepreneurship across disciplines and connects to all of the different efforts around public service and innovative education efforts. And they have many, many other things, but it really is, so that was, so the one thing is, wow, that was amazing. They used a crisis and turned it into an opportunity. On the other end, and wow, there was very systematic embedding into a huge culminating point with a trustee and a $15 million gift and a campus-wide center. But I think the other thing to notice is that happened over nearly 10 years. And so this is a really multi-year, multi-pronged cultural, structural, curriculum, leadership, multidisciplinary effort. So it isn't just something you snap your fingers and do in one day. So I just wanted to paint that picture. Next slide, please. Perfect. Okay. So as we started looking at what the patterns were about 5 to 7 years in, we've been lucky to work very closely with a whole series of universities. Tulane University is one, Singapore Management University is another. And we really use them as deep strategic partners where we are learning about how to create changemaker ecosystems and cultures within the university. And beyond, actually. But within the university, the key questions are, how do we leverage what is already there, but then how do we build on it to have significantly more impact? And so rather than just having a narrow focus on teaching and research, which is very important to rankings, how can we use that asset and flip it so that it can also have social impact? How can we also rethink very traditional hierarchical organizational forms, and how can we have something where it's more around how everyone can contribute? And so this is where, and I love the design of this convening. I love that we have middle school students and high schoolers and educators and people at all levels and from different backgrounds, because this is where innovation happens, where everyone has perspectives that they can offer, ideally a diversity of perspectives, a diversity of age, a diversity of disciplines, a diversity of being community oriented and more theoretical oriented. And so in an organization culture where everyone contributes, ideas and innovation thrive. And very similar, higher ed is often very siloed, very focused in disciplines, very focused in expertise. That is extremely important. There's a lot of value in that. And there is also value and more research showing the importance of multidisciplinarity and the importance of collaborating across those boundaries. It's really hard, but it's really important. And then again, a lot of curriculum and a lot of programs. It takes so much effort to get it launched, and then they just continue. And so I think part of it is, with the innovation culture, how do we have a course that's launched and then every year it's iterated and adapted, ideally in a way where students are contributing, there's input from different disciplines, and things are very dynamic. Next slide, please. Great. I'll give one more example and then I'll kind of race to close and get to the group discussion and panel. But I just wanted to share another institutional example, and where Tulane has a very nice kind of linear chronology of how they've institutionalized and embedded, and it makes a lot of sense. I think Northampton also has a very robust example, but they very much led from a lot of really creative ways to rethink the organizational culture and norms. And so just a few of them, like they decided that they would completely overhaul the entire curriculum all around change making. And so they spent a multi-year effort starting with a research initiative to get faculty and students across every single discipline to define what change making meant to them, so that they could showcase through a research initiative the diversity of perspectives to align around a common shared definition before they began a curriculum change and an institutional change effort. That was really important for the buy-in, but also because it was a research-based, evidence-based process that included hundreds of people in the process before they baked it into the core strategy. First, they, so just for some of, again, the huge innovations that they are really one of the leading institutions internationally. This is a university right outside of London in the UK. They basically have nearly $1 billion in procurement that they use now with a new code of compliance around ethics, sustainability, and social impact in terms of all of their vendors that they work with. They've have built in a sustainability and social impact lens to how they do that. It's a significant amount of money that is now ethically and sustainably and socially impactful investment. They actually also launched a $500 million new campus that took them several years to build, several years to finance, several years to design. They've just moved in the last couple of years. It is a gorgeous new space, and it is completely designed with the values of change making. It is designed to be collaborative. It is designed to be cross-disciplinary. It is designed to be creative. It is designed to be non-hierarchical in terms of faculty and students bumping into each other and all using co-working spaces. And so it's pretty revolutionary in its design, and it's very much aligned around its values. Even the faculty and deans also have performance incentives around change making and impact. And that is in addition to their entire campus-wide initiative where they rewrote the curriculum to be focused around change making. And they also are very strategic in the way they've defined change making, and the change making competencies are linked to a lot of their employability skills that they found that employers want. And so that's where they're also, yes, it was a curriculum change, but it was very much curriculum change in order to have success post-graduation around employment and employment rates. And they are a vocational school, and that is a key part of their social impact is social mobility and economic mobility. And so for them, that was a key driver and a key way to link all the pieces together for their core strategy. Next slide. So, and I'll really, yeah, and I'll kind of wrap it up right after this, but we've seen that social innovation and change making can happen at a single classroom level. It can happen as a single, program in a degree. It can happen with a group of students doing incredible leadership and gathering together and doing work in the community. But all of that from a systems change perspective and systematic scaled impact, we have a vision of what could it look like if this could become part of the entire strategy of a university. What could it look like if this became embedded into the co-curricular and curricular offerings? What could it look like if there were multidisciplinary programs that engaged faculty and students and community, and research initiatives were for the community impact, and learning was focused on real problems and real solutions, and it could be done with community, for community, and the graduates would also have relevant skills to be successful in the workforce and to contribute, and that the way that higher ed engages in the in their community and in their educational outcomes is just focused on social impact. Yes, and I see there is a question around change making as a performance indicator. Again, all I know is that it is baked into, for deans in particular, for performance and promotion incentives. They have what they call Changemaker challenges, and it's baked into the strategic plan of the University of Northampton. And they just have to hit certain targets around change making. I don't know. I haven't been able to see the indicators. I just know from the president that it's been baked in. Sorry to not be able to be more specific. Okay, next slide. And actually, I think let's actually move it to, if you can actually go all the way to the last slide, we'll go, okay, next slide, next slide, next slide. The one that says one more. One more, yes. So actually, before we go to the group discussion, oh, not this one more back, please. One back, please. Yeah. So I actually specifically, right before we dive into our group, our panel discussion, I actually just wanted to pause and just share a couple quick links. The first is ashokaU.org/publications. And Purvi or Rachel, if you could drop that in the chat as well, that would be great. And then also the ssir.org, Innovating Higher Education for the Greater Good. These are, so the publication link is linking to 5 or 6 key publications that is a summary of everything Ashoka U has done. We have always, we've done work over the last 13 years. We've created publications around our vision for the world where institutions are advancing change making in robust ways. We have a 300-page handbook around, if you are an educator or if you are an educational leader, how do you actually do this in your institution? There are 70 mini case studies and examples from our university network. That was a huge labor of love to put together. And then also learning outcomes. So I know there are educators in the group, examples of learning outcomes and examples of how to apply them, and then examples of curriculum and syllabi. And so the publications, it's free and open source for the first time. And we really want these ideas to spread, and we want the value that are coming from all the lessons learned from many years. And then the Stanford Social Innovation Review Series is actually very readable, very accessible articles. It actually features the Tulane University story in one of the first articles and how they evolved and used crisis from Hurricane Katrina to a rebuilding effort that became a strategic identity around innovation and impact in community. We feature the story of the University of Northampton and how they've tied change making as an employability focus, but also as a complete curriculum overhaul. It features case studies of Ashoka fellows who are educational innovators, as well as many of our other campuses. And so we just encourage you to look at that if you want more concrete stories and ideas and strategies, if that's useful for wherever you're at. Okay, so that's the end of all the Ashoka U kind of content. I'd love to go back a couple slides. And now I'd love to weave in a bit more story. And so one more back, please. And we will be hearing from Alan Yu and Devi Mani, who are educators and innovators at Singapore Management University, and as well as Rajesh, who leads Ashoka Singapore and is an incredible colleague. And I love to bring this. So the lens I was bringing was from my student days, and now is my global perspective of innovation in higher ed, but very much rooted as a US, from the US perspective, but with global reach. I would love to hear what is happening in Singapore. There's so much happening, there's so much potential. And so just to dive in, I would love if we can have as the first question, what motivates you to do the work you do, advancing change making and social impact? And if you can please also describe your role and your work. And I might, if you're okay going first, I'd love to start with Rajesh, and then we'll go to Alan and then to Debbie. And then this panel, again, will go for 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll have some time for interactive questions. And then I'd love to make sure we save at least 30 minutes for everyone to go into group discussions and breakouts.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marina. Do you want to go into a gallery view?
Yes, please.
Okay,
So we
all
can
right.
stop the panel slides.
All right. Okay, thanks for asking that question, Marina. Just to introduce myself, I'm Rajesh. I lead Ashoka's office in Singapore and Malaysia. While I was reflecting on that question, one thing that came out very strongly for me is while I was growing up, in my teenage years, early 20s, nobody ever asked me a question around what problems are you solving? The question was always around get a good job, you know? So I was in this juggernaut all the time to find a good job and then move to the next big job. It was only somewhere in the middle, somebody actually asked me, Rajesh, what problem are you solving? And that is when I think I met Ashoka and other change makers, and I realized there is a process to it. There's a science behind it. And it changed the way I looked at the world. And I think that has been my core motivation since then. And I've moved away from that mindset that I need to find the next job. uh, I've, I'm in the mindset that what is the next problem I want to solve? Who do I want to be part of? And that's how I am looking at my life, and it keeps me motivated every day to share that with others and help shift the questions around young people, especially instead of asking them what do they want to be, ask them what problems are they solving.
Alan and then Devi.
Okay. Yeah, good morning, everybody. My name is Alan Yu, and I manage the Ashoka U Changemaker Campus program here at Singapore Management University, and we are the first Changemaker campus in Asia. And my role is to create opportunities for students to think about and promote change making on campus, and to build relationships inside and outside of the university around leadership and change making. So going into change making and social innovation was not something that I necessarily pursued at a younger age. It was not something that I necessarily had a fervor or a passion, to do something so difficult, actually. But I went into a PhD program in leadership studies later in life because I had been working in a corporate environment, and I worked in a very creative field. And I found that my creativity was being beaten out of me, and I just did not feel like a whole person. And I wanted to do work that enabled people to reclaim their humanity somehow. And while I was doing my PhD, I met this really great mentor at the university who was interested in teaching leadership through the arts. And she applied very non-traditional approaches to education. And I began to understand, how we can be so biased towards rational ways that we often forget, those right-brained emotional ways. And that was that was a part of many traditional education systems. Like, for example, you had to do calligraphy and write poetry in the Chinese tradition. Um, as part of my education, I spent a lot of my time living in Bali, learning about the role of Balinese culture and the mindset of Balinese leaders. And I saw how a really great resource, the culture and traditions of Bali, which helped to guide people's sense of spirituality, was being attacked. This was a culture that was being forgotten. And I started an educational tourism enterprise where I worked to create new experiences that help people to understand the value of Balinese culture and its relationship to human spirituality and sustainability. And I also got to get a really great in-depth understanding of how collective leadership works in the system and could be used for positive change. And while I no longer live and work in Bali, I found myself at LCSI and SMU, where I'm very motivated and empowered to teach and develop social innovation and leadership experiences. And what I would say I do goes beyond arts and culture. What really motivates me to do what I do are my own personal values of love, courage, and passion. And I believe that we need to have pedagogies and approaches to teaching that foster individuals' capacity to be loving to other human beings that are either similar or different from you, and pedagogies that encourage people to be courageous, to create change, and to be able to shine one's light, to be governed with a sense of passion rather than with fear. And I think that's that's what really pushes me to do the things that I do. Thanks.
Alan, there is a question for you from Troy, and he wants to ask you, how can co-curricular activities like sport be used for social innovation? For example, how can sport at the institutional level be used as a development tool?
I don't have any insight into sports, but I would venture to say there are a lot of things that you can learn about teamwork in particular, that could be used, that could be applied from sports. But what some of the things that we have done at our university is we had a group of students that created an app, a change making app. So they created an app for their peers to help their peers to understand what change making is and all the change making avenues that were possible. And we circulated this during the Patrons Day celebration. And this is something we would like to circulate with the Ashoka U network. Another thing that we're also doing is we use the arts. So we have a group of people preparing something called Images of Greatness, where they have to research an eminent change maker, and then they have to perform and and communicate to the audience, what is their change-making mindset? What is their gift to the world? How did they think creatively? To show people, again, that there are many different ways to do change-making, whether you decide to do science or, like Marie Curie, or whether you decide to write literature. There are many different ways to make a difference. But we try to create opportunities where students learn by doing, and you can use the arts, you can use sports, you can do cooking, you can do dance, you can actually do anything.
Devi, you want to go next?
Yeah, thank you, Marina. Good morning, everyone. I'm Devi. I'm with SMU's Center for Social Responsibility. And I think you would be aware that community service is a graduation requirement at SMU. And my center manages that graduation requirement. And we try to guide students into not just looking at community service as just completion of hours, but beyond that, the longer term impact that they can have on the community. So before I go on, I just wanted to share, before coming into this social space, I would say I was on the other side, where I was receiving help from nonprofit organizations and volunteers. So one of the partner organizations that was helping me roped me into this social space work. And I've got the opportunity to do both direct service, where we reach out to beneficiaries to help them directly with various programs. And I also got the opportunity in my first position to work with volunteers across many differing profiles. I remember one of the youngest volunteer I worked with was 8 years old, right? And then we have the oldest volunteer who was 80 years old, right? And through that experience, I saw the power of volunteers, how each and every one of us can contribute, right, in various ways, and how we can help the more formal organizations roll out services and help people in a very personalized way, right? So when the opportunity came to SMU, I got the chance to work with young people, right? I have been in this working with SMU for about 10 years, right? And for us at community service, because Marina earlier shared that community service could be, there could be the curriculum space and there could be the co-curriculum space. But at SMU, I think we are very unique in the sense that we are straddling both, because community service is now a credit-bearing requirement. So it's part of the curricular space, but it's also, we don't want to make it too academic focused, right? It must be experiential. It must be rolling out actual services to meet real need. So it's also in the co-curricular space. So our role is guiding the students. How do they go about, having that information on best practices to reach out to the community? How can they keep in touch with the evolving best practices, right? Like, for example, we try to tell students, don't look at when you go and engage a community, don't look at it from a very needs-based point of view. Look at it from a strength-based approach, right? Look at how you can work alongside the community to roll out, initiatives that are more sustainable. How do you build capacity in the community? And maybe I could add on to Alan's what he shared, right, to the earlier question about sports, because the other approach we have done, I think those who are in the educational institutions, you will agree with me that students come from very different profiles, right? Every student is different, right? We cannot have one approach that fits everyone, right? Some students do not know where to start. Some students just want to fulfill their hours, right? Some students identify a passion that they are interested in, or they want to share a skill set. So how we do it in SMU, while we're trying to cater to all the different groups, we also try to work with ready groups, right? Like sports, for example, since sports was asked. So if there's for example, I could share about a group that does biking, right? There's a sports group that goes into biking. And what they did, because when we work with them for community service, we shared with them, why don't you look at your skill set, your own area of passion, and then give that back to the community. So that particular group, about 3 years back, they initiated a project to Philippines, overseas project to Philippines, and they partnered a NGO called Bike for Change, Philippines, and they looked at how can they help a community which is where students have difficulty accessing their, coming to school. Accessibility was a basic challenge that they had, and the biking group looked at how could they provide bikes, right? As a tool for students to come to school. But it's not just providing bikes, because it's something longer term, right? How do you ensure that children look after the bikes? How do they share resources among themselves and all that? So that could be one example, how you work with ready groups, student groups, to take advantage of their skill set. And just to end off, I would say, like, as I said, we all of us will probably face challenges, but what keeps me really going is our youth, right? They are very, very passionate, very, very excited, very, very creative, and that keeps me going, right? Because you always learn new things when you're working with young people. Thank you, Marina.
Yes, and before we go to the next question, it looks like there's been a really active chat. So thank you, Troy, for sparking us to brainstorm and share different ideas around the power of sports. It sounds like there's a few different examples that have come up. I'm curious if you just wanted to speak into that a little bit more from your perspective or kind of the work that you do.
You inviting me?
Yeah, if
Holy
Mortis,
cow,
you sparked
okay.
a pretty active
Thanks,
chat. If you wanted
thanks.
to kind of speak into it further.
Yeah, I asked the question because it has been my profession. I currently work for Sports Singapore, but it's also been something that I think is relatively untapped potential, and it's been kind of a stream throughout my life, starting over 30 years ago when I was a United Nations volunteer in Papua New Guinea for 4 years, helping them set up a national sport program that was really designed for social development. It was around bringing a diverse nation in terms of language and culture together through sport. And then going full circle, I've been here in Singapore for 6 years and working for an amazing government organization that's trying to grow the nation of Singapore through sport. So I see, as I mentioned to you in the chat group, I see lots of parallels between the potential of the tool of sport, but then part of the new leadership trends as well that have been discussed here over the last couple of days. Sport is becoming less and less a hierarchical organization. Participants are becoming more and more empowered to be part of the design of sport. Um, and I think it's been shown that that's not only good for the sport, but it also helps learning, right? I mean, nonlinear pedagogy has shown us that the sage on the stage of a coach doesn't work. And so I was just really interested in hearing ways that can be those ties, and not only using sport, but other co-curricular activities can be brought together. Because, for example, I went to a presentation last week on sports medicine for musical performers, and I'm going, oh my gosh, this is exactly the same kind of thing that we do in terms of preparation and building those into the systems thinking of development. So that's why I asked the question. I've been really fascinated to hear some of these. So thanks for allowing me a minute or two just to kind of explain why my interest.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Yeah, no, I'd love to jump to the next question, but then just to give a heads up, Ellie, you've also been pretty active in the chat. I'd love to hear from each of our panelists for the next question, but just to give you a bit of a heads up, I'd also love to just invite you to speak in a little bit. It sounds like you're doing incredible things at your organization, and I'd love to hear just a little bit more about what you're doing, and then you can also kind of amplify with the question, but it also sounds like you have incredible assets that you have to share to bring into the conversation. So maybe let's go again, Rajesh, Alan, and Devi. And the next question is to just share a concrete example of a social entrepreneur or change maker that inspires you. And again, in the spirit, whatever you have prepared is perfect. But what I love just from what Troy mentioned, I think just social entrepreneurs and change makers, they come in all like from all backgrounds, from every perspective. And so I also think just I love when I hear about someone who just isn't a very traditional, business entrepreneur who did something in the exact same way. And so particularly if there's any kind of creative takes or angles or kind of non-traditional examples you have, that's great. But otherwise, just happy to hear just a range of examples of who comes to mind.
I can go first. I can share two examples. And what I found fascinating about these examples is they're actually quite simple. So just to give you a first example, there's a social entrepreneur that I know in India who works with families in red light districts. And she is trying to get children out of intergenerational prostitution and pimping. What really inspired me is she did two things. So first thing she did is in every place that she works, she builds a small home, a house, and tells the kids that anytime you feel unsafe, you can come and stay here. You know, very simple step. Over time, it actually built the confidence in the kids to get out of the challenge they were facing. Then she looked at all the butchers in the neighborhood and said, "You guys know what's going on. If you think anybody is abusing these kids, call them out or pick them out. So that's just very simple things, right? And another social entrepreneur that has inspired me is he said that English or ability to speak English increases your chances anywhere in the world. So he figured out a phonetic system where he started teaching non-native English speakers English through non-native English speakers, primarily through phonetics. So it's just simple thoughts, simple questions, simple way of thinking differently that sparks a completely new innovation that I've never seen before. And I got a chance to run a few classes in Anglo-Chinese school recently. And what I realized is all the kids there are very socially aware. They know what's going on. And I think it came down to this one question. And I think a lot of us already ask it. The question is, what do you think? The moment you ask someone, what do you think? It just changes the game for that person. And I just recall my growing up years. I don't think anybody asked me, what did I think? So it just fundamentally makes a huge difference when you ask someone, what do you think? And remove the barriers for their participation. And I think that's where change making and innovation starts to thrive.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rajesh. Alan and then Devi.
So I consider myself to be the embodiment of my mentor, and her name is Dr. Rose Martinez. And I kind of channel her when I'm confused and when I don't know what to do. And she had this way of she'd always just take a deep breath and then she would just smile. And as she held space for my own personal anxieties and worries and my own learning process. And for that reason, I grew very strong. And for that reason, I try to do the same and hold space for others. Um, Dr. Martinez, she really loved to use the arts. And we learned leadership through theater, through dialogue circles, cooking, music, taiko drumming. And we co-taught a course called the Gallery of Creative Possibilities, where we presented leadership and creativity using different modalities. But what we had hoped, our students would come out of this class is realizing is that they themselves are the gallery of creative possibilities. It's like you are a work of art. And it's important that you work on yourself to be as colorful as possible. Sure, it is important, I think, to lead people to new solutions, but I also feel that it's really about who you are and how you bring yourself to the full group and how you give other people permission to bring their very best selves to a situation when you do the same. And I think it's difficult to be a good change maker if you don't bring the very best of yourself. And so there have been times when I do get lost as a person. I do get lost as a change maker. But it's only when I get lost when I forget myself. And of course, that's only temporary. And of course, I do remember. And then I remember how valuable I myself am to my own change-making process. Yeah.
Marina, if you don't mind, can I answer the question in relation to what Ellie has also put in the chat? Because I think there are a lot of people who inspire me, but in my current work, day to day, you have to get up and work with this group of students who come from different profiles. And I always share with my own boss, what inspires me is really our students, right? And so Ellie has asked, does making service a requirement make it difficult, right? Make it more challenging to cultivate genuine motivation. And I think that's something we've been struggling with at the university, because right from the start, SMU was when we were first incepted, we made community service a graduation requirement, right? And I think what we have accepted is that not every student would leave the program or leave the university motivated in the same way, right? Some students may just come in and just see it as a fulfillment of hours, and then move on to their other interests and all that. But what we see is, while we see a few of such students, majority of students come in and find new causes or new interests through community service, right? And we also see while like for community service at SMU, 80 hours is a requirement, right? So while several just do the 80 hours, many more go on to find projects that they are very passionate about. And then they continue to make sure the projects are running long term by taking up leadership position in the next run, right? So they may have finished the hours, they finish the 80 hours as a member of the project, then they step up to lead the project. And then, the third year, they are so passionate that their project must continue. They come in as mentors, right? So these are students who I would say inspire me. And I mentioned about learning from students. I learn every time I meet groups of students, right? I think I'm a bit familiar with social causes out there. But recently, for example, a music group, a music club came to me and said they want to use their talent, their skill set to reach out to people who are suffering from aphasia, right? And that was not something that I was familiar with, but because the student groups have gone out and done the relevant research, they've identified the non-profit organization in Singapore who reaches out to people who are having that condition, so they were able to share with us. And they already came very well prepared. How are they going to use their music, right, to reach out and collaborate with the organization to go out and create a sustainable, longer term project. And I'm happy to say the students are currently working on the project. They've already touched base with the partners, they've touched base with the beneficiaries, and they are developing the project right now. So I think it's looking for successes all the time, little successes, right? Every simple little success matters. Some students may go on to do more than 80 hours. That is itself a success. Some students share personal experiences, right? They feel through community service, they are now better able to just engage their elderly at home, right? Because they did a project with people who aging related. Some students share that because of a project related to special needs, they are better able to work with friends and peers out there. So we try to look at that. Ellie, it's not as I said, it's not positive stories all the time. I do have students who come to us last minute, just before graduation, and then they are struggling to fulfill their hours. So we take a different approach with them. With such students, we try to find ready-made projects that they could easily come in and fulfill their hours. With other students, we try to find new needs, unmet needs, partners, interesting partners, and then we work together with them to collaborate and curate projects. And I'll be very excited to hear from you, Ellie, also. How do you manage that also in your area of work? Thank you.
Yes, I'd love to hear just for a minute from Ellie and the amazing work that you're doing at UWC SEA. And of course, it's a whole incredible network of campuses. So curious to hear what you're doing in your UWC.
Yeah, hi. I mean, I won't talk for long. There's lots of things I'd love to talk about, but just for a couple of minutes, it might be nice to share a few things that we're doing. So a couple of our students are here, one from East Campus, one from Dover Campus. So I'm just going to wave at them, which is great to see them. I know there are lots of them in the other forums too. So we're a massive international school, not-for-profit international school. We've got 2 campuses in Singapore, and it's our 50th anniversary this year, so we've been in Singapore a long time. Service is like a massive part of a UWC education. Everybody does service, from the youngest students who are only 4 years old, all the way up to like our head teacher, our head of campus does weekly service. So it's quite interesting. I was very interested in what Devi was saying about helping students find their passions and use their passions for service. A number of key things I think that we try and highlight is the idea of partnership, that service isn't something that you kind of philanthropically do to somebody else, that it's about, working together with partners to identify needs and support. And I think acknowledging the spirit of humility, that we benefit as much from doing service with other people as they do, often more. I think the other thing, a big focus, I was so interested to hear about Ashoka U, actually, because this whole idea, what we're really trying to do is develop a change maker spirit in our young people. But we do wrestle with this idea of whether or not you make service compulsory or not. On the one level, we want to make it compulsory because we say this is really important and everybody should do this. But on the other side, as soon as you say to a 14-year-old, well, you do this because you have to, it's tricky. So interestingly, I can see why you need the hours as a way of kind of tracking whether or not somebody's done the commitment, but we actually remove all conversation about hours. We just say, we expect engagement and commitment, and we kind of avoid talking about hours at all. That's one way we've tried to do it so that it's not about hour counting. But just like Devi, we have the same thing. We have some students who are super passionate and set up their own NGOs and do these amazing things. And then we have other students for whom, we have to chase them every single week to get them to, turn up on time to do their service and that sort of thing.
Thank you. So great to hear a little bit about you. Now just our final question. And I'll just, I put a note in the chat. I would love if there's any student, whether high school, middle school, or university student who'd be willing to also do a 1-minute intro. It would be great to get a sense of the different voices in the room before we go to group breakout and discussion. So just feel free to just drop a line in the chat if you're open to that. And we'll do our final question for all the panelists. And this is just thinking about what's the ideal state of how can the Singaporean ecosystem operate? If assuming that all key sectors, higher education, business, government, nonprofits, they're all contributing to positive change in the world, and there's change makers everywhere. So kind of what does that look like, and what are the key changes that still need to happen to get there? And again, if you want to go in the same order, Rajesh, Alan, and Devi.
I think I may not be able to speak for the changes at a structural level across the different sectors, but I can talk from a point of inspiration. So I've been inspired about change making from actually mostly from low-income communities and people who don't have anything, or people who live in remote communities. A lot of people I hear say that this is only for the privileged, but actually the truth is people in low income communities, people in remote communities, schools in remote communities actually showcase really good change making spirit, and they build that for the respective community. So I think I just wanted to make that point. So the reason why I'm saying that point is if they can, if that spirit is there in any part of the communities, I don't think there should be an excuse for anyone from a first world country to say that we don't have problems to solve, or the problems need to be solved by someone else. Because in Singapore, a common narrative that I've heard is, oh, there aren't enough problems to solve, which I disagree with. And I think there is a great opportunity for us to spot micro problems, find people that we want to work with and do something. So there is a great opportunity, I think, for more young people in Singapore to really say that I can do something and start there. So that's what I would start. Second thing I would say is, can there be more trust, or can educators build more trust with students and create more opportunities for them to implement some of the crazy ideas? Maybe it's just that implementation of that crazy idea that gives them that confidence. I'll give you an example again from the school that I worked with. These 4 young boys came up with this idea that they wanted to introduce nap time. And they wanted 15 minutes of nap time, and came from a place of genuine interest because they feel very tired. So when we were having a conversation with one of the administrators, he said, "Hey, if we do this, they will abuse it." And I was like, "Hey, there goes your trust. Why don't you give them a chance to just try this out for 1 week and just imagine the kind of impact it would have on them." So, so I think if different sectors create opportunities for their constituents to try things, I think that will build an entrepreneurial spirit and then enable more cross-sector participation.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to answer this very complex question the best that I can. So at LCSI, we actually had this very interesting conversation on systems change versus systems innovation. So if we look at a system, it's comprised of parts, infrastructure, and it has a purpose. And if you rearrange the parts, upgrade the infrastructure that connects the different parts, we'll call that systems innovation. But if you're able to change the purpose, the rationale for why the system exists, then you have something called systems change. And nobody doubts the quality of education here in Singapore. I watched a really great video of Australian teachers going into the schools of Singapore and watching these kids solve problems with technology. But this is systems innovation, because kids are expected to do well on math. They're expected to do well on their exams, get good grades, get good jobs. So is the purpose of education changing? It is the same model. It's the same approach. But on the other hand, so that's secondary education. But on the other hand, I would like to say that higher education in Singapore is changing and evolving. And part of that has a lot to do with some of the things that Singapore Management University has done in the last couple of decades, and how this university wanted to provide a different kind of education experience for the people living here. And we introduced, we wanted to move away from exams and mass lectures to project-based learnings, internships, things like community service, providing an alternative. And this has led to different new educational opportunities offered by other institutions within Singapore. So I think higher education initiatives, they play a role in developing the human capital of Singapore, and there's more that can be done. Also, I think our stance as a university is that, we can advance growth in Asia. We can advance digitalization. We can advance sustainable living by aligning ourselves with businesses. And businesses have the capacity to provide market-based solutions to problems. And so we want to develop our students with the right ethical mindset so that they can enter these companies and have some sort of positive influence. Regarding the government, unlike many places in Southeast Asia and other countries around the world, I would say that government actually works. In some ways, it almost works too well, to the point that people expect the government to solve problems and do the work for everyone. And I would say that our social sector is a little bit small for that reason. And there's opportunity for maybe the government to kind of step out of the way and encourage social enterprises, social sector organizations to do their thing. And maybe the government can focus on on maintaining the system, setting the policy and the vision, making sure that we have sustainable infrastructure, processes that preserve our quality of life. If you want to have a zero waste, circular economy, you need to have a government for that. You need to have good research into sustainable systems, and you need to fund that. You need government to promote and encourage best practices, help businesses to restructure, promote public awareness, and make sure our environment is healthy. And so I believe the government should focus more on working on ways to get businesses to be more sustainable. And maybe they can leave room for social service organizations to make a difference. And then the last piece, I think, is the people. And I think we need to move away from this distorted view that living in a democracy means that you vote every 4 or 5 years. Democracy is a way of life. It's how you practice and voice yourself every day. And if you really want to if you really want to live in a democracy, of course, I would encourage you to be a change maker and to make a difference. And I think in this society, sometimes we are reluctant to express ourselves. And I can say that because I came from America, and we tend to be a little bit more outspoken, and we tend to be a little bit more forthcoming in what we think. And I think there is more opportunities for young people to really voice. I don't think, sometimes we're afraid we're going to rock the boat, but there's nothing wrong with putting your voice out there and having a community come together because they care about the same thing that you do. So thank you.
Thank you. So finally, Devi, and then we are so lucky that we will have 2 students get to do really quick intros before we go into group discussion. So it'll be Jaish and then Maria Clara.
Marina, I took the liberty of just putting down some of my pointers. And this is some of the things that I've come up with. And I think, first of all, it's really very important to work alongside with the community. So it's not just the formal bodies that are coming and coming up with what we think is best for society, right? So work alongside the community, tapping on everyone's respective skill sets, right? And I think also be flexible to work around limitations, because each of us have our own challenges, right? So we work around that limitations and see how we can come together. And personally, I just wanted to say something, a personal learning experience, especially during the pandemic. I've learned to try not to say no at the start, right? Because because most of us were just ready to say no when students or groups come to us to want to work out a project. So I'm trying my best to say yes, and then work out how can we work around the limitations. Then I'm also thinking we should be daring to innovate, right? Be very creative as possible. And I think again, COVID, the pandemic gave all of us a lot of opportunities to try things we would never have done, right? And finally, to be accept and be open to failure. So that's what I quickly have to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Devi. Okay, wonderful. I'm so looking forward to hearing from Jaish and Maria Clara. Jaish, you want to introduce yourself a little bit for a minute?
Yes. So for one, I am a middle school student at EWC at East. I was I did there was a service in called Fresh Fruit Friday, which is basically we collaborate with the home organization. Like, I'm sure you all know what the home organization is. Like, yeah.
Thank you. So glad you're here. Thank you so much. And I also love, I'm actually inspired by you. I've been watching you so every so often, and you are taking stretch breaks. And so I'm actually going to invite everyone to take a little stretch break, because we are not designed as humans to be in Zoom all day, every day. So thank you, Jaish, for modeling what I think we are as humans. We have bodies, not just heads. So thank you for your leadership. And now, Maria Clara, I'd love to hear from you as well.
Hi, I'm Maria Clara. I'm from IET and I am a student from UWCSCA. So basically, I am passionate about like feminism and gender inequality because of my cultural background. I guess like women as a like have a big impact on the society and the way. And yeah, I really like talking about that because like it's kind of a stereotype. And I'm here just because I want to have another perspective, like how like you educators and like people who have experience, how like you are working so hard for us. And because like sometimes I'm more criticizing, I criticize more than try to understand, and I'm trying like to change that. So for that reason, I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I love that. We should all figure out how to do that, be part of the solution, not just the problem. So with that, I would love to make sure that we have the next 25 minutes or 20 minutes or so in group breakouts. So what I propose, unless there are any burning questions that you have for the panel that you'd love to have, I actually think everyone did a really good job of throwing questions and input into the chat. So I actually think we did a good job of integrating feedback and also different perspectives and voices. So I'd love to invite us to go into breakouts. And so I propose we go into 4 different breakouts, which will be about 5 or 6 people, 6 or so people each breakout. And we'll try to do it so that either me or Alan or Devi or Rajesh, each of the kind of presenters will be in each of the rooms, mostly just so that we can keep moving forward with a conversation and you don't feel that you've just been abandoned. But what I'd love to do is I'm going to quickly drop into the chat a few possible questions that you can use to start in your breakout group. And I know you are all change makers and rule breakers. So I know that the vast majority of the time people do what they want to do and what they want to talk about. So really, this is just an excuse for all of you to have a way to connect with each other. But I do, as potential prompts to get the conversation going, as a way to connect with your colleagues, I invite you into 3 different questions. One, where are you in your own changemaker leadership journey? Whether you're a student, an educator, a professional, a beginner, an intermediate, someone who's been doing this for decades. We're all in different stages in our own journey. Secondly, what team members can you pull in to support you in this work? So who do you have around you that can be an ally in contributing to social change? I think this is a key question because you cannot do it alone. No matter how amazing and incredible you are, the more people you have, the more fun it is, but also the bigger challenges you can tackle. And it just makes everything much more possible. And then finally, if you are affiliated with an institution, what is one thing you can do to move your institution towards becoming a changemaker institution? It sounds like there's already some that are already on this, doing great work. And so, but I'm sure we can always keep innovating, always keep improving. So with that, I invite you to cut and paste the questions if that's useful, to bring into your own chat room, because this may get drop off. And we'll give everyone 15 minutes. And the goal is for every single person in the room to speak if possible, if there's enough time for that. And again, feel free to use these questions as a starting point for connection and a structure, but really, it's just a way for you to introduce yourself, find commonality, and learn from each other, be inspired by each other. I will invite us all to come back in 15 minutes or so that we can have a closing, just wrap up at the very end for the last 5 minutes. So thank you, Purvi, for putting us into rooms. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're nearly at the end. Thank you for bearing with us. I actually just wanted to drop a reflection question in the chat, invite everyone to just share here, and then I will pull out some folks who might want to speak into it. But just any insights is in our final 4 minutes as you think about the whole session or even the entire event that you've been at yesterday and today. Just any insights that you wanted to share, any commitments to action that you are excited to take on. And again, I'd specifically thought about for this session, but honestly, I'm just excited to hear about any changemaker commitments you have that is sparked by this whole event, or any key insights you have. So if anyone can drop that into the chat, or if you feel inspired to take yourself off mute, I'd love to hear some comments as well from a few people. Yes, that there are other change makers in Singapore eager to collaborate. Yes. Yes, and it was great. I was in Christy's session and she was able to draw everyone out. So it was so inspiring to hear from everyone. Any other feedback or comments? Any particular commitments to action? Because really, I think we're all here thinking and learning, but really it all comes down to, are we inspired to action? Yes, new contacts, amazing. Oh, good. And I'm loving the sharing of different resources. This is fantastic. Isabella, it sounded like you were on a roll. Do you have any actions you're committed to with your platform?
Regarding actions, yeah, I'd love to be able to release that to the public, I would say by August. We'll have to do beta testing because it's about like sharing resources, it's about creating a ecosystem that supports one another in pursuing like small ideas and pursuing like projects or initiatives of any size. So on that, I would say probably the action committed to is hopefully perhaps I could get everyone's contact here. It'll be nice to invite everyone because one of our main target audiences are change makers, because all of us here, we have ideas, we have some way we do want to bring an idea to fruition, but not necessarily, like sometimes we don't have all the skills, you see. Like sometimes we need to build a team, sometimes we need to find people, or sometimes we need just resources in general. So I think perhaps I'll go around denoting anyone's interest if you would like to be a part of this platform.
Amazing. Great. So thank you. I love the idea to share contact info. It looks like there's already several people doing that. And Isabella, you are a super connector, which is why you have a platform to connect people to do collaborative change making. That's perfect. Anyone else? Any final comments you want to speak into?
Marina, just a lovely, lovely session, really inspiring. I really enjoyed hearing from our panelists. Just such what I'm struck by just with everyone is the diversity of stories. I mean, we covered, everything from sports to Bali to platforms to, and talking about should service be, mandated or not, or, it's just I was reflecting on the diversity of topics, and yet it all just wove together. So thank you very, very much for just a really terrific hour and a half.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to everybody for being so interactive in the chat and then being willing to be pulled onto the group conversation and being so talkative in the breakouts. Honestly, this is just key part of every conversation is just the people, and if people are willing to engage. So thank you for being wonderful and open. So thank you so much. And again, thank you to the co-host folks with Ashoka Singapore and Singapore Management University, our colleagues Rajesh and Alan and Devi, and the amazing Rochelle and Purvi, who were our amazing tech support here in the session. Thank you so much. It made everything so much smoother. Appreciate it. And thank you and good luck to all of you.